Okay. Hello, Rise Up Visionaries. I'm Susan May, and I'm here to help you on your journey of unplugging. And I am thrilled to have a special guest today who I think is just perfect to help you on your journey. Elliott Freed and I met years ago through a mutual Facebook friend, and I was pretty much immediately taken by his way of breaking information down. He just breaks so much down in a way that the layperson can understand easily. He has a very eclectic knowledge base from everything from science and medicine to alternative medicine. He also has a very spiritual outlook on life, which he says is based in reality, which I love. And I also really appreciate his irreverent sense of humor, because what is life without laughter? So Elliott, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me here. It's nice to connect in beyond just the Facebook chats.
Yeah,
you know?
Kind of person, right?
Yeah.
So recently you were on your friend Derek Stratt's Enlightened Abroad podcast, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And you kind of covered such a broad spectrum of topics, everything from your childhood and football to Qigong. And then, of course, we finally got to vaccines, which I meant to mention in my intro. This is Elliott's book, The Vaccine Primer. So I kind of want to start a little bit like where you ended there. As you know, I memed you with a quote from that interview. And I was going to be able to put it up on the screen here, but we're improvising a little bit. So I'm going to read it, and then I want to ask you some questions about that. Okay? Awesome. Okay, so the question that Derek asked you was in regards to this feeling that many people have that we are in a spiritual, or I think he used the word psychological, a psychological warfare. We're in a psychological war. And this is what Elliott had to say. He said, "I think it's a difficult planet to live on, and it takes a lot to really cultivate one's mind and one's psyche and one's psychology. And when something difficult happens, if you haven't done that, then you'll just be sort of beaten about, and it will feel like that." And you meant it will feel like psychological warfare. So I guess my first question is, like, what do you think is the most important work you've done to make it feel maybe that it doesn't feel like psychological warfare?
Boy, a lot of self-evaluation, I guess, would be the broad category. Just getting to know who I am. I mean, the I is sort of eternally changing and integrated with everything else, but to just have like an ability to connect into myself, be familiar with myself, be familiar with my responses, my prejudices, my view of the world and its limitations and how it's mine. It's not universal or whatever. And then I can just, go in and take some breaths and say, okay, there's all this stuff happening in the world, and then there's me, and there's, right around me. And so, I mean, it's a long process, and I can't say there's like I did this one practice back in 1997 and that did the trick. It's kind of been.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think just generally, meditation obviously is helpful.
Right.
If you're just sort of sitting there quietly breathing, you're not quite getting the full spectrum of possibilities.
Yeah.
So then also like studying history. So like, especially in this time, like we're going through these massive changes that historians are going to be looking back at and going, yeah, those years were, that was the American Revolution. That was Martin Luther posting his theses on the door of the church. That was, that was the Roman Empire being founded. That was, so this is going to be, people are going to look back at this as a historical moment. It's like a big moment. And so as we're living through it, if we just we've been doing our own little thing, we don't really know what's going on in the world. We don't know the long threads that are playing out now. If you don't know all that, you're just like, I was just walking down the street and all of a sudden these people died in China and now we're under lockdown. What happened?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so would you say that's like a good starting point for someone that feels that way is history? Like, I think one thing that's so difficult for people in this whole thing going on right now is where do I start? And I obviously you can't answer that for every person, right? Because we're all on a different journey, as you have pointed out. But maybe just a few starting points, maybe just to give people ideas.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to read like the financial press over the years, and then to read what's going on now with them and the way they're just, like you read about BlackRock and Vanguard and the Rothschild group. I know you say the Rothschild, and everybody's like, oh, either I know what you're talking about, or it's just a conspiracy theory. And not many people actually do know what's going on. But they have the largest investment advising firm in the world, and they have for 200 years, whatever. So when you look into what those firms are doing, you're like, yeah, they're doing what money does. They're taking over things. That's what money is for. David, what's his name? Dr. David Graeber wrote a great book, which I recommend to everybody. Debt, the first 5,000 years.
Yeah.
And he talks about how, we didn't have money before, and then we got money and what it did, and how it changed society, and how it changed our thinking and our way of relating to each other and to life. So he goes through like a sort of a broad scale history of that.
Mm-hmm. You were just diving right into something a lot deeper, I think, than when you get right straight to the money issue, because I know that's something that you love to talk about. I feel that you've expressed some frustration too, just with, I'm not going to pretend I know a lot about this because I do not. So it's not something I have dove deep into, but I love hearing your perspective, and that, I love the idea of the gift economy that you have talked about, but I just feel like the average person, that's a difficult concept to even begin to address.
Right. If you just grew up, you were born into a world, there was money, you grew up, that's the way the world is. You never really thought about it. You never thought like, oh, somebody invented that.
Right.
Human beings haven't always had that. Somebody made it up, and they made it up for a reason, and it's existed, and so David Graeber goes into how that happened.
Right.
5,000 years ago. Somebody could be born in this world today, and you just assume that's the way it is. And so what we think of as nature, human nature, mm-hmm. is really sort of this programming from society broadly, not just money, but from society broadly. We get programmed. That's how human being develops.
Right.
Then you have to go back and you have to kind of figure out not just what the programming was, but how programming itself works. And then you can sort of watch that happen in your own head. You can watch. For me, it's been really helpful to watch it happen in other people first.
Yeah.
And then I take what I see in other people, and I'm like, okay, is that happening in me? And then I can see, it's different for everybody, but you can see patterns that are common.
Okay.
Or it just sort of opens up.
You're talking about programming, and I feel like recently you talked about how people are not brainwashed. Like, you don't like that idea so much. And so, I feel what I've learned, I was a hypnobabies instructor, which is hypnosis for childbirth. And so I learned a lot of things about hypnosis and how our brains work. Now, I don't know that they are truth, but these are the things I learned. And they make sense to me. Like when I listen to, guided meditations where it's like affirmations, I do feel that it's making a difference in my life. I can feel the positivity of those affirmations kind of influencing how I behave and how I feel. So I do feel our subconscious has, can be programmed, and then we see what's going on the TV and how people are reacting. So I am curious to hear your take on that, programming versus being brainwashed, and then maybe free will and choice and all those kind of things.
So so another book, General Theory of Love by Dr. Thomas Lewis, I think. Thomas Lewis. And he and a couple of his teachers at UCSF were psychiatrists, and they go through the last 100 or so years of science on how the brain is programmed, how the brain and the human being, what happens when we're born, and how we develop into the adults that we become. And it's really fascinating what they found, what's been found over the years. They summarize it and explain it. And so we are born not as a blank slate, but with some blank slate qualities. Anybody who's had a kid also knows, like, we also come in with the personality too,
Mm-hmm.
So there's some combination, like the nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
And I think maybe are more programmable or whatever. People are more like, this is who they are the day they're born.
Mm-hmm.
But there is room in there to, like, we learn language. We learn to walk. We learn to, I was hanging out for a couple of weeks at a friend's house, and he had a little 6-month-old baby, and I'd watch this little 6-month-old baby try and make a poo, like the food went in and stuff's like moving through their intestines, and they're like, and I'm like, oh, okay, they're going to poo in like a half an hour or something,
I remember one of my children, they were scared the first few times. They cried when it happened because it was a new sensation. Like, I'm talking the first day. Like, I remember they were like startled, like, oh my gosh, what's happening to my body? Yeah.
Right. I mean, 9 months in this little hot water tub and everything, whatever.
Hot water tub, yeah. Yeah.
Who knows where we come from before that? So
Right.
This is definitely different from wherever that was.
Totally.
It takes some getting used to, and it takes some learning. And so that's, training, programming, brainwashing, whatever.
Right. So let's just wrap this whole idea up. What would you say to someone who feels this is a spiritual battle or a psychological war?
Focus on your own training.
Wait, say it again?
Focus on your own training.
Oh, yes, I love that.
People who talk like that are not really prepared,
Right.
Yeah.
So it's almost like when you're viewing it that way, you're almost more vulnerable because you're just, and I feel it's such a fearful way of looking at it too, right? Like that you're just in that space of fighting. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're fighting, and you're like a little kid in this battlefield of adults. Like these guys like Fauci and Jamie Dimon, from Citibank, wherever he's at now. All these people running this show, like, they've been doing this for decades. They've been training for this. This is the game they've been playing.
Right.
The BlackRock people and so they're Anderson Cooper or whatever. They've been. Anderson Cooper's a Vanderbilt. His family's been doing this since the mid 19th century. Moving big amounts of money and power and making decisions about the way the world is. So, like, these people have been at it for a long time, and you're just like, you went to grade school, maybe you went to college, you got a degree and got a job, and like, now I got a house and some kids, and I got to feed the kids and change the diapers. And all of a sudden I'm on this battlefield, like,
That's almost my life you just described. And actually it was the kids that brought the awakening for me. So, and I'm lucky because that was 15 years ago. So I have had some time. So, I wrote down this quote, and it just reminded me that you just said this recently on Facebook. Start acting like an adult who is responsible for the co-creation of the world. And that reminds me of what you were just saying right now. And I think it's very, I always, whenever I say this stuff, I put it back on myself too. It sounds harsh to people, like, stop acting like a child. And I'm like, I have been a child. I understand. I'm relatively new to all this stuff, and it is scary, and you have to just face the fear and do it. You have to accept, that I can make this choice. I don't have to listen to what they're telling me to do. I can make a different choice. So I love that perspective.
But one of my favorite examples is the pipeline protests out on the Native American lands in North Dakota, or wherever that was. I'm an environmentalist. I like clean water and lots of trees and these things, and I think, our society has gotten pretty lost, ecologically speaking. But like protesting against a gas pipeline, every house in the United States has a gas pipeline going to it, and it's just part of that entire network. And being like, no, you can't do it through a gas pipeline. You have to truck it all on the roads. Like, if you're going to protest that, stop using natural gas.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know,
My husband
I
and
mean,
I, we have these conversations all the time of people not understanding the practicalities of, like you say, reality of how does the world work, and like if you don't want it to be that way, what are you willing to give up? What are you willing to change? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm all in support of those changes,
Mm-hmm.
but just protesting against the old thing, you're going to just end up with no gas, no heat, no ability to cook your food, no hot shower, no.
People dying
Like,
that are in the far north that need the heat.
So,
Yeah.
I understand the issues. Still, like, be the adult and create the thing that you think should be, and you have to do that in community. You can't just be like, okay, I'm going to go
Yes.
personally create the alternative to natural gas. But there's
Right.
a lot of people working on it. Get together with them and get involved.
Awesome. Okay, Ellie, I'm going to take a quick break and make sure that I am actually recording this, because I would be very upset if we got to the end of this amazing conversation and I was like, I didn't record any of this. So I'm going to quick get on here. I mean, it says stop recording, so I'm going to stop. Okay. Okay, so I recently asked you a question, and it was, what words of inspiration or advice do you have for the average person coping with today's insane, upside-down world? How can they make a difference? And I loved your response. I wanted to have you read it if we were on Zoom. And
well, if you've written it down on one of those notepad things, you can hold it up.
I know. I don't know if you'll be. Let me hold it up. Isn't it backwards though? It looked like it was backwards on the screen. Remember, it's the blue one that you
Okay,
post.
yeah.
Is it backwards?
Okay, I'm not gonna be able to read that.
It's too small. Okay. Well, someday we'll have you do it in your own voice. Okay, so here was Elliott's advice for the average person and how they can make a difference. Communicate with other people in person. Find people who can have a conversation with give and take, call and response, actual communication, not just one person expressing while the other waits to express, like old-fashioned human relationships. Communicate about things that are important to you and to them. Take time to listen and consider what you have heard, and have these conversations with others who can reciprocate in kind. Do not try and make a difference in the world. Just be in good relations with those around you. By good, I do not mean where no feathers are ruffled. I mean where real connections happen between people who care about each other in feeling, word, and deed. So yeah, you were the first person to respond, and I was so honored that you responded. And that was one of the reasons I put it first in the document, because you were first, but also because I think it was my favorite advice that I received back. I think many people might feel that this isn't enough, and I would love to hear your thoughts to someone that says, well, how can that be enough, and why do you tell me not to change the world? What would you say to that?
Well, so the world is, there's the world as a whole, but there's human society made up of 8 billion people. And what am I going to change? Am I going to go change, am I going to change you? What am I going to, like a hammer and nail, a screwdriver? Like, what am I going to do? Make you somebody other than who you are because I don't like the way you are?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I going to go change?
Right.
I'm going to go attack somebody. Mm-hmm. I'm going to change the world. I'm going to go attack somebody. I'm going to go say, you're a bad person. You shouldn't be that way. And I'm going to force you to be some other way.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't build yourself a house or whatever, but don't go changing other people because they're not what you want them to be. They're not going to like that.
Very true. Very true.
But if you communicate with them, then you have sort of a living relationship. Instead of this thing where you're changing them and they're changing you because you don't like each other, mm-hmm. you have this living relationship where you're working together.
Yeah.
And so at least you have that communication. When you build or you cultivate that relationship over time, then something like this happens and you have somebody to talk to about it.
Yeah.
Instead of having this person who's you've been trying to change each other all this time.
Right.
You have somebody you're in a relationship with, and they can be like, oh, I have this bond with you. I care about you. You don't want to get the shot. Why? Mm-hmm. It seems reasonable to me. Why don't you want to get it?
Right.
and you already have this, you know how to have that conversation. You might know the details of what you want to say exactly, but you
Yeah.
have somebody that you can talk to, and they can tell you why they think it's a good idea, and you can work out something.
Yeah, I feel that on a very deep level. The thing I'm grappling with, because it has been my experience in the past 18 months, and prior to that, I had been researching vaccines since our son was born, and he's 12 now. So it's been 12 years. Is that I find most people, even people that you're very close to, literally don't want to talk to you. They don't want to. They just shut it down. And so I feel like many of us have lost this ability that you're talking about to have a conversation with someone who differs from you. And then when those of us that want to have the conversation try, it feels almost impossible. I don't know if you have any insight into that.
I live in Mexico.
Yes.
In part for that reason. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that I live down here, but I grew up in California.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I just, I come, like, I'll share a story. I had this great day. This was a couple years ago. I was in this town here, San Cristobal in Chiapas, and I was sort of walking around town. I stopped in to see a couple of friends in their shops. I stopped somewhere else, whatever. And I was talking with all these local people, all these Mexican people. Some of them from like Mexico City or whatever. But I felt like the conversation was nice and paced. I heard what they said. I responded. They heard what I said. They responded. And there was sort of an English and Spanish, because my Spanish is mediocre. It was less mediocre then than it is now. So. So some of these people that were really good at listening. So then I get back to the hostel where I'm staying with this young Mexican couple who runs it, and there's a German girl that I would chat with now and then. And then there's this old American guy that has come in for a couple of nights, and this group of young American kids. And man, they were just like yelling at each other, yelling over each other, establishing dominance. It was so unpleasant. I was like, I can't. Oh my God! I just stood to the side watching this, going, "Yeah, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
That's why I want to be around that."
Yeah.
So
I feel all that too. I studied in Mexico for not long, just a month after I graduated college, and it was amazing. And so I love hearing your stories of Mexico. They're very, they draw me. And I have to say, before this interview, that was one thing. I know I interrupt people, and I know I'm a good listener. Like, friends come to me for listening, but I can be that way. And I think you're right. It is very much an American thing. I will defend mothers of young children, though. I think a lot of us doing this is we're just like, oh my gosh, it's another adult. I need to talk and say all the things.
Well, yeah, which I mean, if I may interrupt, like an American here, but yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing down here is like young mothers aren't by themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's a whole family and a whole community, like,
yeah,
it's this restaurant I go to down the way, and I've become friends with the owner, and there's this girl that used to work there or something. She'll come in with her baby, and just like 7 people will take care of the baby for an hour and a half while she sits around and has a meal and coffee and is chatting with friends and whatever. And then they live in multi-generational families, 3-4 generations together at a time, or at least nearby. And
yeah.
So the idea, like the isolated mother, it's very uncommon down here.
Yeah. I mean, that's, for me, this whole community, like you're talking about how we need to get together. Obviously, one person or one nuclear family can't make these changes that we're talking about. And the good thing I feel coming out of this is more and more people are open to the idea. Now, if it will happen remains to be seen, I think. I mean, some people are doing it already. But, in large numbers, in a significant way, we'll see if people are ready to make that jump. So I hope so. That's my hope. One thing, were you going to say something?
Oh, I mean, like half the kids under 34 are living with their parents now. So, people are like, oh, that's terrible because they should have their own places. But I'm like, yeah, well, at least they have the chance to have a relationship now.
Yeah, totally.
Just, a couple phone calls.
Yeah. We unschool our children, and my husband jokes that like they're never moving out, and I'm like, that's fine with me. They can stay here forever. And it's nice that they want to be with us. That part is wonderful. So in your interview with Derek, one thing you talked about was when you started looking into the vaccine issue, I think you were living with your sister, maybe? Is that correct?
Yeah, I had been in Mexico. I went out to visit family and hang out for a little bit for a couple months, and was planning on coming back down here. And just found that it was better for me to stay there for a little while to sort of help some family members sort things out.
Yeah.
I didn't really have much else to do, so I started studying. And that was when the whole measles outbreak in Disneyland happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up kind of diving into that issue a little bit. Became obsessed with it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing you mentioned was how I think you mentioned she was into the sciences. I can't remember exactly, the sciences or medicine, but she still was able to hear you and listen and not, be totally turned off by what you were telling her. So I was just wondering if you could tell us maybe more about those conversations, or, why was she able to do that, whereas so many people seem to shut off?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess to give credit to her, she's a good conversationalist, a good listener.
Mm-hmm.
She's a teacher by nature, by trade. She got her master's in neuroscience from Northwestern University in Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
and then transferred and was working on the PhD at Stanford, and then dropped out. Just was like, she had enough of the 100-hour work weeks and all that stuff, and she dropped out. But she ended up going back and becoming a high school teacher and was teaching high school chemistry and astronomy. So her real love was the astronomy. I think she's working on a PhD in astronomy now through some Australian university. But so I was hanging out there, studying all these things on the internet, like reading all these scientific journals, reading these government reports, reading all these meeting notes and things like that from various government bureau meetings and things. And then, and she would go off to her day teaching, and then she would come home like, hey, how was your day? Da 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 da. Just like when adults live together, that's kind of,
Mm-hmm.
ideally there's some communication,
Yeah.
And, and also her kids were a little bit older. They were in diapers or anything like that. So there was time to have those conversations. And so she has this, she had this master's in neuroscience from Northwestern, a little bit of, she, like her name still shows up on papers because the research she did, the data she collected and everything, people are still using that information. She was doing, I think, she was making electron microscope slides of lamprey brains to study calcium channels, how calcium went back and forth, kind of with the big picture of like, how does memory work?
Yeah.
There's still nobody really, scientists don't really.
Yeah.
So, and she had no real attachment to vaccines. She didn't know anything about them. Like when her kids were born, they got what they got at the first visit, and nobody ever said anything. Nobody was like, you got to come back in for more shots. If she took the kids in for something, which was pretty rare, but sometimes she'd take them to the doctor for something or other. Nobody was like, are they up to date on their shots? Nobody asked. Nobody cared. She didn't think anything of it. So, as we're having this conversation, what was your day like? What was your day like? I'd be like, oh, I read this study about the aluminum in the vaccines or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, oh my God, that sounds problematic,
Right.
And,
right.
Yeah. So that's just one example, but just, over the months or whatever I was there and researching this stuff, we'd chat about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then she would try and talk about it with her colleagues and was shocked at like the way people just flip out about it. She was like, whoa. So she didn't want to make that her crusade, but she brought it up to the other chemistry teachers once that there was aluminum in vaccines, that aluminum was a neurotoxin. And one of the chemistry teachers was like, no, it's not. Like, oh my God, a chemistry teacher at one of the top private high schools in the United States is saying aluminum is not a neurotoxin. Like, what are the, like, who is the expert now?
Right. Right. Well.
So anyway, back to the original question about me and my sister. Like, we had that ability to communicate. She had that ability to listen.
Yeah.
I give her the credit for that. But if you don't have that, I think that's kind of the main crux of what's happening now.
Yes, I agree.
So many people, like, there is everybody just has their spot system,
Yeah.
It's just like the cog in the machine. You do the thing with the gear next to you, and that's what you do.
Yes. Yeah, it's a tough problem. And like you said, I mean, when we go back to the not trying to change others, right? With our hammers and our screwdrivers, like, we can't change others. So I like later you gave the advice of be in relationship with people that you want to be in relationship with. And I think this is the place that a lot of people are getting to and realizing, well, if these people that I love and care about can't actually hear me and we can't have the conversation, then I need to be willing, not to be mean about it, but maybe they need to fade from my life for a while, because it just feels, I guess, fruitless. I don't know.
What is to love and care about somebody if it's not to like listen to them when they
I agree.
want to communicate with you?
I agree. Okay, I think I just want to. So what we've done so far is the interview was one quote, and then the quote from before was actually we're kind of going backwards in time, which I like because I have this vision in my mind of starting here, but I almost feel like a lot of our solutions, not that we're going backwards, but we're taking skills that we've lost, that were kind of like what made us human, right? These communication skills. And this story just hit me just at such a deep level that you told it, I think, a year or two ago, the story about the indigenous tribe. And do you want to tell it? Do you know what I'm talking about? The boy that went to the city.
No.
Yeah. Why don't you tell it? Yeah.
All right, so there was this, I think they were an Amazonian tribe, and they had essentially zero contact. I mean, somebody knew about them, I guess, but they had this hut on the edge of the village where, when a hunter would go out and he would get some food or whatever, he'd kill an animal, and then he would come back, he would stay in the hut for a few hours until he was just sort of, calm again, back in that sort of parasympathetic nervous system state where he could relax and be at peace and be emanating these sort of peaceful communal relations with his family and his tribe. And it was a couple hours. It wasn't like an exile or anything, like people could go and take him food and water and stuff. And it was up to him to decide, it was up to the hunter to decide when, he was ready. And so then one of these, one of the young guys, one of the sort of the great young bucks of the tribe goes to the city. And, he's there for, I don't remember, but it was a very short, it was like days, maybe a couple of weeks or something. And then he goes back to the tribe. He's like, he's had enough. And he goes back to the tribe and he stays in that readjustment hut for like 6 months. Mm-hmm. Doesn't even leave the hut for 6 months. Maybe he goes out to go poo and pee or something. I don't know. But basically he's living in that hut for 6 months before he'll even go into the garden. Mm-hmm. And then it was months more where he would just go to the garden and then go back to the hut. Mm-hmm. Because the intensity, the aggression, the speed, the energy, the sort of the manufactured suction of the life force going on in the city was so intense that he had to get back to that feeling of being natural, of being a natural human being again. It took him close to a year. I don't remember exactly how much that second period was, but it was a long time. And that's just after a couple of weeks, a few days out in the city. And so here we are living in this, especially in the United States, where it's so, people come down here and it's like they've been drowning for years, and all of a sudden they can breathe. So, how far we have to go to really fully heal and be our natural selves it's a long journey. It's a long journey, and sometimes I feel like what's happening now, like this, when the astrologers talk about this event, it's basically like 2020 to 2034 or so. It's when the things are happening, the stars or whatever. They call it the biblical event, whatever. It's every few thousand years. There's this much intensity in the astronomical configurations. And so it's going to be 14 years of this kind of deep dive into the self. And that's why I talk about the need for the mental discipline, for the emotional discipline, and not like the rigid militaristic sort of thing, more like the guy in the hut, like really get in there, get in there and get to know we gotta take the retreat, go live on the beach for 6 months. And be like, I know people are like, oh, my kids or whatever. Like somebody's gonna feed them. Don't go get yourself in the state where you can go and be with your kids as a human being instead of as a cog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. So this past spring, I actually got off Facebook, and I know you did it. We almost did it at the exact same time, and I noticed some other people did too. And I actually ended up deleting my account. I didn't think I was coming back, to be honest, but and I felt the slow, it was like a detox for real. It was like just getting calmer and calmer and calmer, and this story just stuck with me. And then more recently, I had this kind of realization that as a kid, I was always so anxious, I performed well, I was valedictorian in my class. I did well in the mainstream type situation, as far as what people think of as success. I did well, but I was anxious, and I didn't sleep well and just all this stuff. And now, since we've become parents, we have just gotten farther and farther and farther off the beaten path through our choices, to the point where our lives, to most people, would just be so, we still live, in a suburb in Florida, but, we don't have to do anything almost on any given day because our kids are home. We don't have school. And even with choosing this slow pace, I still have realized how much you can just get sucked into the pace of life here. And the realization I had is that when I feel calm, it's not that I'm changing, it's that I'm going back to who I'm really meant to be. And it felt so profound to realize this calm state is how humans should be. It's not that anxious person was me. It's that I was responding to the environment. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that story is just incredible. So I look at it as, for me, like I said, looking at it as from an indigenous tribe. I've always just been so interested. I don't know if you're familiar with, Elizabeth Marshall Thomas. Okay, she wrote The Old Way, and when she was a girl, her family went to Africa, and she lived with indigenous tribes, and her mother actually wrote a book, I think it was The Peaceful People, and got completely torn apart that she was saying that tribal people could be peaceful, which was very interesting. But anyways, Elizabeth Marshall Thomas, I just loved her book and about how those people lived, that it was just so, it's kind of what you're describing in Mexico. And so as we move forward, I look at what lessons can we take from our history, right, and from our ancestors. Would you look at things that way? Not that I don't think we can go backwards, right? But what can we take as we move forward and try to make a better world?
Excellent question. That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was less than 1 billion people on the planet when everybody was living in these sort of wilderness tribe lives, and now there's 8 billion of us, and we have cell phones and indoor plumbing, and I don't want to be all of modernity is bad and we need to just go live in the trees,
right?
Cover ourselves with leaves or anything. But it's gotten it's gotten pretty extreme. And when we look at the mechanisms and how to change the mechanisms or whatever, society. But I think the big thing is that's why I keep harping on the volunteer gift economy. I know to just sort of hop to that from here,
it's okay.
It would be a bit difficult, but generosity, and that's why I talk about the whole notion of the community and bringing people together. And I've sort of thought about what to do with my life now that I'm kind of fading out of the vaccine education stuff. But an idea that I like is what I call the therapeutic communities. Just starting where we are, just I had a pretty low point in my life, and I found this support group that I went to, and we'd meet weekly and just have these intimate conversations with each other about what we were struggling with. It was for divorces, but and that was a huge transformation for me, to have 5 people that I could sit in a room with and just tell my story to, and then hear their stories. And and so now we're in this place. Like, I lost a marriage and a family that went with that and everything, but here we're losing industrial civilization and society and all these other things. As we're sort of going through this resource decline, like we've hit these sort of resource peaks, and we're going down these resource slopes now. As the population is growing, more people want more stuff. And so we're seeing the battle for that. We're seeing we're seeing the battle for that. And the rich people are like, well, let's see if we can get the poor people to kill a bunch of themselves off by taking this. We'll shoot them all up with this poison, and they'll be like, woo!
Oh my God!
I'm being saved. It's the rapture or whatever. I don't know, but people made fun of the Appleseed cult or whatever those people were a few years ago, who were like, we're gonna remember that it was like there was the Jim Jones thing when I was really young, Ghana or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And people put Kool-Aid, and there was Apple something. It was kind of hilarious and sad because people were killing themselves and their children, but now it's like on this global scale, people are just like, I saw the vaccine thing. I call it X-Files medicine. It's like every other episode, the sexy X-Files guy gets really sick and almost dies, and the sexy X-Files doctor makes some little shot, and at the end of the episode, you see, the sexy X-Files agent guy, he's like all up in the hospital bed, he's getting better, and next week he's all out running around doing whatever he does again. So we're like, oh yeah, you can just make the shot and everybody's gonna be fine. They have no idea. That's what they know, and then they're like arguing for that. Arguing that should be national and international policy, is that we just do like this X-Files TV medicine thing.
Yeah.
And they're killing themselves, and they're killing each other, and a lot of people are dying.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's not. But there is this sort of like, let's just herd the people together and kind of mentality that the elite, whatever the managers of the planet see the people as the stock, and they have to be herded and shepherded and dealt with in some way. So for us to get out, like, I can't take that on. You can't take that on. They're huge. They've been. This system has been in growing for thousands of years, or at least hundreds of years. This sort of iteration of this system has been growing for 400 years or so. And like there's big families involved, but there's just people who get a job in management of this system and keep it going. So for us to take that on is almost impossible. But if we can sort of start creating something else, start creating these communities, these living communities where people are having these relationships and really developing empathy. And that's one of the things I really love down here in Mexico. I've learned so much down here about how to relate to each other. And like, I know a lot of Americans have these strange ideas about Mexico. They think it's a poor country. It's the 15th largest economy in the world. Mexico's a pretty well-to-do country. I almost never see homeless people. When on the very rare occasion when I see a homeless person, it's like a guy who's just completely schizophrenic and just gone, but I mean, I have friends that are kind of street people, and people help them out.
Right. I was just going to say, the way you describe it is that people take care of each other, and their families are so interwoven and so much larger and interconnected. It just seems, that's what I feel we've lost here, right? Like, everyone's just so isolated, and then if you have a crisis, it's almost like there's no network to pick you up,
Here, the network is so vast that you just almost don't really have a crisis. Like,
it's beautiful.
And I mean, there are people here who struggle. Like, I remember I was in a cab and we were stopped at a stoplight, and there was a guy going up and down the row asking for money. And everybody that he asked looked him in the eye. And they responded. Not everybody gave him money, but everybody looked him in the eye and responded to him like a human being.
Human connection.
And nobody was like looking down on him or like turning away and rolling their window up or something. And that was a big city. That was a big industrial city of like 2 million people, at a busy intersection. So, like I said, I don't see,
It's
I don't
different.
see that homelessness. And even though, yeah, most people are part of those big family networks, but some people aren't.
Hmm.
But even then, when I was in Querétaro, this sort of I kind of befriended this street guy, and he had a place to live. He had this simple little cold water, flat, or this little like a bed in this building with cold showers and stuff. And he took me around town. He's like, these people give me some cheese sometimes. These people give me some bread sometimes. And I was sitting in this restaurant once, and there's sort of these glass windows, and across the corner was this park, and there's this old guy just sitting outside the restaurant, leaning up against the window, reading the newspaper. And I can tell he's probably had a shower in the last week, but not the last couple of days. And there's this lull in the business in the restaurant, and one of the girls working there goes out and calls him in, and they go in the back room in the kitchen, and I hear them laughing and chatting and everything, and they have this nice long conversation and this nice interaction. It wasn't just the event; it was like a relation. They were relating to each other.
Yeah.
Like 5 minutes later, he comes out with a plate of rice and chicken.
Nice.
That was way better than what I was eating. I'm paying 50 pesos for this sort of manufactured meal. This guy got the good home cooked stuff.
Oh,
free,
man. That's great.
So, I mean, yeah. People just take care of each other.
Yeah. I love that.
And everybody pitches in. Everybody pitches in too. So it's not like.
So what made you go to Mexico? Like, how did you end up in Mexico? You just on a whim, or?
Yeah. I mean, I was living in Bellingham, Washington, and I was like, after 2 winters, I needed to defrost and find some sunshine. And
yeah.
A friend of a friend was looking for English teachers, and
okay.
I said, I'll do it. And I got down here and was like, I had no idea how cool it was down here.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Elliott, I think we're going to... Oh, you go. You were just going to say something.
Oh, even in that big city of 2 million people were so humane to each other. Mm-hmm. And so I think in terms of the way out of this sort of collapse that the United States is going through is those human connections. Definitely. To rehumanize each other.
Yep. So good luck. Good luck doing that. How do we do it? That's the question. It's so slow.
I mean, I recommend just with friends and neighbors and just really.
Yeah. I mean, neighbors, like you hit on that. I mean, how many people we don't know our neighbors. We just moved here 6 months ago. So we have a little bit of an excuse, and how many places I've lived where you maybe know, your 2 direct neighbors, but you don't know many people. And that's very common now. So you're right. It's definitely something that needs to change, starting with ourselves. So, yep. Okay.
Further questions, or are we?
I think we're good. I was just gonna ask if you have any closing words of wisdom for us. Mm-hmm. That's great. Oh man, you were cutting out just a little bit. Wait, start talking again, and I might have you say that one more time. Let me see. It's really weird. The sound is mostly okay. I think it might be the internet down there, but I'm not sure. So wait, talk right now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you pretty good. Yes, that's good. And I definitely heard you say choose being human first. If you can kind of just, you don't have to say
anything. We'll just leave it at that. Just choose being human first.
Oh, that's great. Love it. Yeah. Choose being human first. We're going to have to make t-shirts. All right, Elliott, this was really wonderful. I really appreciate it. And, questions are always popping up. So who knows? We might have to do part 2, in a few months here, when after you've posted more thought-provoking things and more current events have happened. But I think we got a little taste of your sense of humor today here, and lots of Mexico love. I love hearing about Mexico. So thank you so much. Do you want to tell everyone where they can find you and they can find your book?
Yeah, Elliott Freed on Facebook. It's two L's, two T's, part EED. I'm on Facebook. I don't remember what my profile. I think my profile picture is some 3-year-old kid smoking a pipe right now,
Yeah,
but
yes. Yes.
it'll change. It'll change. But and then the book, yeah, vaccine primer. Weebly.com, Weebly.
Yep.
And that's, yeah, if you have questions about vaccines, or it was really written for like people who just they're curious but they don't really know. They don't have any
Yeah.
like they never really had a reason to look into it, but their cousin or their friend or somebody had an injured kid or whatever, and they're like, oh, I had no idea there's a problem with vaccines. What's going on? So this book is a primer. It's designed to just introduce basic issues and the questions and what we know about them.
You've written some other books also, right?
Yeah, mostly like poetry and short stories and things like that.
Are those up on your website or?
Yeah, I have a website, sort of. It's reality distilled into words.weebly.com.
Okay. Awesome.
It's under construction, you might say.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll keep our eyes open for that then. All right. Thank you. I'll see you soon. Bye.